Hello and welcome to Breakfast at Mom's. I'm Mom, aka Sandra, and these beautiful ladies are my daughters, Candace and Alyssa, and these gorgeous beauties are my daughter-in-laws, Felisha and Brooks. And we are so excited that you are part of this online community of women where we come together every single week to talk about the things that you want to talk about. So this week, our moderator who is going to spill the tea is Candace. So tell us, what are we talking about this week?
All right. Well, since I am the newly one here, newlywed, we're going to talk about maintaining that intimacy and connection. And I know, take it in. I know, everyone's like, oh, a little spicy, a little saucy. Mm-hmm. Don't worry. It's not all about sex. I'm getting deeper.
We will stay appropriately rated.
We are definitely going to stay appropriate, especially for this one. So I was kind of glad I got this topic to talk about because even for the single people, I'm reaching out to you today too. I have a little method to my madness, as I say, about love and intimacy. And I'm talking about intimacy as emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual.
Okay.
Yeah. So touching on all those bases. Okay. And also, this is how your relationship. Just think of your married relationship, your single relationship, you're in a relationship, all the good stuff. Respect, communication, compromise, trust, and love. I've learned these through the time of being single. You can have maybe two of these, but then these will fall. You can have a couple. I'll tell you more stories to come, but let me just get into this. How do you cope with someone who is not as romantic as the other? Like, I like romance.
Yeah. And that, I'm going to go back to when we read the book, Personality Plus, because not everyone, and here's the thing, if you think that you are going to change your husband because that's how you are, you're going to be one frustrated lady because that's not going to happen. I've learned that is just not who Dad is. But I can honestly say probably out of this group, the romantic, Colby and Dale are probably the most romantic out of the entire group. But that doesn't mean that if your husband's not, that it's a bad thing. So you have to know that if you're waiting on your husband to be the initiator of all things, you're going to be very frustrated. Yes. You're going to have to say, okay, if I really want this, I'm going to be the initiator. And I'm talking about anything. Right. I've told this to Brooks a million times. You know, if you want a date night and you want it organized, if you're waiting on him, he's not going to do it.
No, Brooks
that's
has a
just
great way
not
to do it.
who
her look.
he is.
I'll let her share.
You know, my husband does not, it's a rare thing that my husband, plans something like that. Normally he sees it pop up on his calendar that we're going somewhere. So,
and that's kind of what Candace was saying. I just took after you in that, and that, this year has been something that I have just decided that it's very important to me that we spend that time together. We've had quite a few years of, being everywhere and not being able to have that time. And so I was like, this is the year. And so I told him on New Year's Day, I said, I'm scheduling one date night a month. And so we put it on the schedule and it's already there. There's already babysitters that are booked out for the whole year. Like, it's a done thing so that he has nothing that can come up and be like, oh, we can't do this because, or we're too tired or something along those lines. It's important and it's done. But you're right. You have to take the initiative. It's not something that, and it's not because he doesn't love you. And it's not because he doesn't want to do it. It's just not in his DNA
It's just not
to do that.
I think people have different strengths. So it's tough because you watch all these romantic movies and it displays this good man as being a romantic man.
Right.
And so sometimes when you are dating or when you're getting married, you think, well, my husband must not love me. He must not be a good man, that he needs to do that for me. But that maybe, like you said, it's not in their DNA. They're good at other things in your relationship, but maybe you have to take on that romantic role.
Big time. And speaking about how movies, fairy tales, Hallmark,
my favorites.
I know. I was going to step on Flea's toes, but I love Disney. But every video, it's the princess gets the Prince Charming, and they're all of these things. And so we grow up believing that that's what life is really about. And when our husband doesn't fit into this mold that we have believed, we think that we married the wrong person or there's something wrong with them. And that is not the case. And so there's a book called Finding the Hero in Your Husband. The revisited edition is the one that you want to get. And she really talks about all of this stuff that we're talking about today. She talks about intimacy. She talks about, how we live in this fairy tale world of things that this is what we want. Or let's just go with social media. We see everyone in social media in what they want them to see, that the perfect way that everything is. I'm just as guilty, so you don't want to put out there the things you don't want people to see, your house a mess and you're, have too many wrinkles and, all this stuff that we see that we don't want other people to see. But that's a good book.
Good.
Exactly. So I also want to touch up for all the single ladies out there. And also my husband, I know you say he's very, that's how he got me. But romantic. Let me tell you, here's how a way to help them. You set a Pinterest board for dates. Things that cost no money. Because let me tell you, that's one of the excuses people will make. I don't have money to take you out to this lavish. I don't need a lot. My man got me on the back of a pickup truck. I had a charcuterie board and some wine. And we watched the sunset, and that's my favorite. It's romantic. It's nothing crazy. But a Pinterest board, if you're talking about, he never buys me anything, he never gets me flowers, there's a thing called an Amazon list, and you can send him the link. Those things. But for the single ladies, my
husband's supposed to be buying the things on my Amazon list.
No, that's for us. That is for us.
That's
I was like, dang, I was getting excited.
I mean, if you want him to, that's the way to do it. If you wanted to help him out.
No, mom's list is for us. Chanel or Hermes. Yes, we get the Amazon list. The kids
we get the Amazon. But my thing is for the single ladies, like she said, it's not going to be a fairy tale. And I think that's what you have to come to. I'm not going to have the perfect guy come out to you and
he is perfect.
To you.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to get to.
I said that at your wedding.
Yes,
that Colby is not a perfect guy, but he's the perfect guy for you.
Yes.
And that's how you have to look at your spouse.
Yes.
He's not perfect because guess what, ladies? We are not either.
We're not perfect at all.
But he's the perfect man for you.
So true.
So as I'm getting married, now it's almost to a year to our point. My thing is, what advice would you ladies give for keeping that long-term relationship? How to keep a connection for that long?
Flirt.
Oh,
Yes, I am a big
I like this.
flirt with my husband.
Flirt.
I'll even tell y'all a little secret.
Do we want to know? I don't know.
I don't know.
Please tell.
Anytime Trevor is either on stage or he's in huddle or he's just talking or we're in meetings,
I don't know that I want to know this.
La, 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 la.
I constantly, I'll send him a text oh boy, your butt looks good at that.
I am going to think about this at church tomorrow when Trevor's on stage.
Did you do a little wink, wink?
It's true. I like lifting his words of affirmation. So
telling each other for him.
No,
but that's hilarious. And don't you dare do anything like that. Oh my Lord.
So funny.
Okay, I'm in love with my husband, and he is,
and you're supposed to
so
be
hot to me.
Flirting is a great way,
Yeah,
especially in text. Now, make sure it's appropriate. You don't want somebody
pick up your phone and go,
it's not appropriate, however. But flirting with them, especially, when they're not expecting that.
Exactly.
Makes them feel important. And so what was the question again?
we got distracted by
I'm
what advice would you give to keep a connection for long term?
Okay.
I think along the lines of what we've been talking about, scheduling out those date nights, that's something that we've all really been trying to do this year. And then kind of like what Flea was saying, as weird and cliche as it is, if you're trying to be intimate with your husband, set that expectation before they ever come home for the day, because you know how it is. If you don't, and you've been kind of thinking about it during the day, you're like, oh, maybe maybe not.
Right.
By the time you've done dinner and the kids are asleep and you've gotten in bed, you're like,
Exactly.
He didn't really know, so maybe not.
Right, exactly. But if you set that expectation of like, hey, like, you know what I mean? He has that expectation. So do you before all
and then
that
he's
even
going to help you get the kids down.
Yes. True, though.
Wait, is that how you do it?
Yeah, maybe we just had another tidbit of information. You want your kids down.
But follow in what you tell your husband.
Follow through. Yeah. No, on the same lines, like for not just intimacy, but just, to keep the relationship going, to laugh about it and to be friends.
Yeah.
But on the same lines, like Brandon and I, we have a certain text because we're big King of Queens fans. And so there's a scene where Doug Heffernan, he calls his wife on this one episode. He says, "I'm thinking of you."
Oh, that's
and so we have it saved on our phones. And so whenever throughout the day we'll send it, but we also kind of know it's leading up to having, a nice evening,
Right.
and it's something along those lines, but it's those things of setting that expectation, but also having fun and laughing and enjoying each other's time together.
For sure.
Awesome. I love this. I'm liking all the tidbits here on long term, but I also want to connect with you on, so I was thinking about this and I'm, my whole emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual. And if there is a troubling and something's wrong, like it's long term, or it's not flirting anymore, not doing this, you need to turn to God. What's your long-term relationship with God? How's your spiritual long-term relationship with Him? Even so, like you're here is like, okay, maybe I'm not even focused on that. I'm so worried about like my relationship and this. Also turn to that side. That's
Bring
for the single ladies.
the Lord into the center of that relationship.
That's what I really want to reach out. I was single and I was like, I was single for so long because I was very picky. And then, I had a relationship. I had a relationship with God. He was my boyfriend for a while.
Oh, amen.
He was my boyfriend. And you're like, who's my boyfriend? He's the one almighty. Let me tell you, I'll do any
one.
I'll do any boy. But you really, for the single people out there, it's okay. You're okay to be alone. Have that relationship with God. Have that strong connection. So when you do meet your wonderful husband, you know how to communicate with him in long term. I want to touch base on that part.
Listen, the most intimate thing you can do is praying with your husband.
Yes,
Like,
and I want to say, make sure that's in there.
That just makes him even that much better.
Yes,
right.
I just love you.
Oh, I know.
Isn't it awesome? Like that connection and being with, Colby is so sweet. And you all have to have your time with God too. Like you can't just be
Exactly.
I literally talk to God in the car. My car must be the most uplifted car because I literally pray to work, make sure I'm having a good day. Colby listens to music on the way home. He's constantly listening to a message or something, but you have to yourself.
Yeah.
Before you can even move on to a relationship, it's gonna be a whole nother episode about seeing on how you do all this. Have a relationship with Him, because that's where it's going to get started off too.
It's also even just how we feel about ourselves as women, because if we feel like we're not pretty, we feel like we've put on weight, or we're getting too many wrinkles, or whatever.
That's it.
The subject of my week.
Don't make me start counting.
So when we don't feel good about ourselves, then we don't feel like we want that time with them, or we want to be intimate with them. But here's what I can promise you. They're not thinking about that at all, because they're not seeing the weight that you have put on. They're not seeing the wrinkles that you have. My husband has forever, when I've said something about myself, get very frustrated with me and say, I don't know why you say that about yourself, because I don't feel that way at all. Your husband is in love with you and he wants you. And so I know that that's hard sometimes as women, because we don't feel pretty or sexy or whatever. So then maybe we need to start really focusing on ourselves. What can we do to feel better about how we think we look?
That'd be that self-talk episode.
Our self-talk episode, yes. But also just do something that makes you feel better about, you feel pretty, you feel sexy. And then when you feel that way, then you will want to be able to have that time with him, because he is not thinking at all what you're thinking. I can promise you that.
That's a good one. I like that a lot. All righty.
Not that you have any problem feeling pretty.
Not at all.
What do you say when you arrive knocking on the door?
The most
Today.
beautiful person ever.
No. Oh, today? Your favorite person.
The most beautiful person
ever.
Yeah.
It's really true. Like, I mean, I do have, not to say I'm like crazy positive, but I am. I think it's just always been, if I'm not going to say nice things about myself, what is everybody else going to say?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, the world's already crazy and negative. I have to be my own
Cheerleader.
cheerleader for serious.
And even talking about that,
Seriously.
talking about what we're saying about ourselves, which is so important, but what are we saying about him?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, what are we saying about him?
It's almost like we hit on all of these topics this season.
Right, we did, because I think we talk about that a little bit in the art of communication. What are we saying about him to other people? Because you can't talk negatively about someone and then expect that you're going to want to be close to them and be intimate with them, or just sit and snuggle with them, or just hold their hands. I mean, my husband, when we sit and watch TV, there's a pillow between us because we're both leaning on it, but he will lean over and slap the pillow, which means give me your hand. And he wants to hold my hand the whole time.
And I think that's sweet. You see, it's like just a little touch. And that's a love language, by the way. And that's one of mine.
Right.
Like,
Touch is a love
definitely
language. And so just, it's important what we're saying about ourselves so that we feel good enough to be able
and I think that
to,
hits on,
and what are we saying about them?
Yeah. I think that's very big. And I think it hits on one of my other questions. I have a lot of questions, but like, sorry, it says,
we're only a 30-minute podcast.
I know. We could have a whole other thing about it. But then that hits on this question that says, how would you tell your partner that you're not being fulfilled intimately or connection before it gets too bad? And I have to say, again, it talks about yourself, but there's and this is really serious. Like, the internet has so many things to venture out in being bad, like they can turn to. If you're not helping me, then I'll go help myself.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that really goes with communication where you're not being fulfilled. Yeah. And it's very scary because the internet's right there.
Yeah.
To fill that void in their life if you're not gonna if you're not going to help.
Right. Yeah. So Brandon and I actually had this conversation this morning in our real life, because not even bringing up the podcast, but he, works with a couple different guys, and there's a situation where there's a husband who's not being faithful, and he and all his friends found out about it, and there's a situation. So it's like, hey, he wasn't being fulfilled one way, and so he's finding what he needs. And so we had to have that conversation of, hey, like, listen, like, we'll have that talk, we'll have that communication,
I do the same.
But also trusting that, like, I believe my husband, is fully fulfilled, and he, and that we are able to trust each other and know that that's being taken care of. Right. And that we'll be able to communicate those situations.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that every guy who strays, the woman wasn't doing.
No, not at all.
Exactly.
Not at all.
So, sometimes people just do, but
to reassure each other of each other's love and each other's commitment.
And here's the thing, going back to where we talked about the love tank and reading Personality Plus, going back to that. But here's the thing. I just had this conversation with someone that someone doesn't just decide to up and leave or up and cheat just all of a sudden.
Exactly.
It is things that have gone over and over and over again. And so it's important that you're having that conversation to let your spouse know when you're feeling
it's awkward. Yeah. You have to.
And you don't want that conversation to be when you're at your heightened being upset. Yeah. You want this to be when you're, a good time, maybe not, just making sure that you are having that conversation.
I think having something that Dale had started a couple of anniversaries ago, when we go out to dinner on our anniversary, he will ask, in what ways this year can I better serve you? And then I will in turn ask him that same question. And sometimes it has been, hey, this past year, there was not as much intimacy as we would have liked. So like in the future, how can we change that? Or there was not as much communications, or I felt like maybe I need more words of affirmation from you. So having just, even if it's at the start of the year, like, hey, we're going to check in.
Yeah.
What is our goals as a family this year? Where can we serve each other? But having some time, either once or twice a year, that it's not like you were saying where it's stressful or you've been feeling this and you're like, oh my gosh, now I have to say it, where it's just like, hey, let's just genuinely check in. Like, let's just look at everything.
Because we're not mind readers.
No.
Exactly.
And neither are they.
Exactly.
They're not, and you got to help them out.
And you want to make sure that time that you're having conversation, not only are you're focused on one another, but it's, you're comfortable. You're both comfortable. You're both, it's maybe private. It's just for you and him. Like, it's not something
Kids can't hear.
Exactly. To make sure that those things, you really think about the atmosphere of that. Even if you pray over the room, start the conversation with the prayer so that, everybody's
candlelight.
Read Song of Solomon.
Saying like Brooke said, privately, knowing that the conversation that you guys have isn't being repeated to your best friend or your family. Like, this is private. Because I think that is a number one killer for your spouse to share things with you, is I don't want this going to your best girlfriend. I don't want your sisters or your mom to hear about this. Like, I just want to have this moment where it's just the two of you and it's not repeated out of your mouth somewhere else.
Agreed.
Yeah. No matter how close you are.
We're doing so good on this, but I really want to read this question because someone written in. I know we got to get going. Time is ticking. Yeah. But so we thank you for writing in this question. I'm gonna read. All right. So this is from Tammy. She writes in. She says, my husband is always, like, we get in an argument. He always goes to the other room in an argument at the end of the night. How do you reconcile an argument before bed? And that is such a good question.
Well, hi, Tammy.
Hi, Tammy.
And if you have an answer, let us know.
Turn out.
We have this episode called The Art of Communication. No, I'll jump on this because if you did not watch that episode, first of all, I encourage you to go back and watch it because I moderated it. But there is a saying that I've always said in our marriage and I've shared with everyone, which is, what is the hill that you want to die on? And I think 9 times out of 10, when we're arguing with a spouse, it is over something so insignificant, not a huge deal, especially if it's something like this. We're going to bed angry. It's because at some point from work until bedtime, something happened and it blew up in some type of an argument.
And you're probably tired.
Right, exactly. So I think at moments like that, even if it's not hey, we're going to resolve this, we are at least before we go to sleep going to say, I love you. Okay. We're going to say, hey, I can't finish this right now because I'm exhausted. We can pick it up tomorrow, but I do want to tell you I love you. And I am going to kiss you goodnight, even if you're both like, you know what I mean?
What was that?
But there is something about being like, okay, I'm just going to let that go. And if it's something serious enough that I need to pick it up and this is the hill I'm willing to die on, then we can talk about that on another day. But for tonight, we're going to say I love you and just be done with it. And that might mean I'm saying I love you and then I'm going to sleep because I'm done talking to you. But at least you're communicating that, hey, like we're still a team and there's still this connection, even if I'm fighting
or
with
maybe,
you.
Sorry.
Go for it.
9 times out of 10, you wake up and you're completely over it.
Yeah.
And I think about in Ephesians where, right after the verse where it says, don't go to bed when the sun's down angry. Right after that, it says, anger gives leadway for a foothold by the devil. Right. And so we have to be careful that when we hang on to this anger, that it is causing us to look at our spouse different.
Bitterness.
So we've got to let it go.
And be slow to anger. I mean, you have to be slow to anger. I've learned that through my relationships and stuff. Be slow to anger. But what if you are that person who is quick?
I'm not slow.
She's a quicker. She's a quicker. She's a quicker. She's quicker angered. She's quicker angry. But then you got to think, are you going to be? But I feel like you have to talk that in your communication with your partner already, like your husband already. Like I quickly
or maybe even have this conversation before you're mad and say, all right, when we're angry and we get into a disagreement, anytime before bed, we're going to make the decision now that we are going to still be in the same room, the same bed, and do what Alyssa says. But we need to make that decision when we're all
That's
That's good. I like that.
When we got married, Dale told me, like, before we ever got married, I will never go sleep on the couch. Like, this is
awesome.
where I am. And if we can't resolve it, like, there's an issue. If the two of us can't just say, I'm letting this go and I love you, and we'll talk about it tomorrow, because that, like Felisha was saying, the Bible says that it's going to cause a moment where now not only are you frustrated, but you feel alone and isolated, and now you're sobbing because you're by yourself. And why didn't he come in here? He should know that I'm in here sobbing.
And he's in there snoring because he is no longer thinking about it.
Yeah.
I don't understand how you could be in bed like, and your husband's like passed out. Like he's like, all right, deal with it tomorrow. Shutting my brain off.
Like, I'm still crying.
Yeah, I'm like moving hard.
So Tammy, communicate.
Yeah.
And tell your husband, like, we have to figure out a better way when we're angry to handle this before bed.
Because that's what it sounds like. She's more upset with. Like, I think she's more upset that he just leaves.
Right.
And I think she's a problem solver.
And people who say we never argue are flipping lying.
Right.
So you're gonna argue. Sorry.
Mama's calling you out.
You're going to argue.
You
know, you're going to argue. I'd love to say that you're not, but you are going to argue. And I wrote this down because as we go along, as we're married longer and longer, you know, we get out of that where we're in the, you know, the honeymoon mode or wherever we're in. I wrote down, you have to change your thought of, oh, I'm just so in love, from I'm just so in love that you're making a choice to be in love forever. Because love is truly a choice.
Yeah.
And so if you just like, you know, my husband has told me forever, if you ever leave me, you better pack my bags because I'm going with you. So what would be the point of me leaving if he's coming?
You get a vacation.
Wait a minute.
So he has told me that from day one. And I'm so glad that he did, because you know what that has really told me? No matter what we go through, no matter how angry we get with one another, he still is going to love me because he's not willing to let me leave him, even if I've decided I'm done with you and I'm leaving. And that makes you feel great as a spouse, whether that's, you know, either way.
And I want to say, like, if your husband hasn't said that to you, and maybe he just doesn't know how to vocalize it, say it to him. You know, when you open that line of communication, it makes it much easier for guys to then respond. And so once you say it, then it changes that atmosphere. So I don't want, like, because, you know, my husband's not the talker.
No,
you know? And so he may not say those things. He'll do things, and he provides, and the way that he acts in our relationship is perfect for us. But I understand the way that he works.
Exactly.
You know, he's not going to say those specific words.
No, he's not. No.
So find the way that your husband
doesn't mean he doesn't feel that way.
Correct. Exactly.
But he is just not. And so that's another thing, is we have to stop comparing our husbands to other people's husbands and what they do, because it will take you in a spiral. You know, you have to look at your relationship and your husband, and just, if you've got to sit down, I can remember young in my marriage, writing all the, like, being so mad and like thinking all these things that I'm mad at him about, and how he doesn't do this and doesn't do that. And I would start writing, making myself write that's where I got to say 3 things about yourself. I would start writing everything good about him, because then it starts to change your mindset and your perspective on that.
Sure. That's good. Well, I know we're getting close to our ending here, but I wanted to let you guys all know, whatever season, I like that when you do that, every season you're in, always put God first. If you and just remember, God will always love you. No matter what your relationship you're in, no matter if you're single or going through stuff, He always loves you. Your husband is your support. And then you have your kids who will always love you too. And we're here.
All right. So that's all the time we have for this week. So we want to have you keep the conversation going. Put your comments down. Let us know the things you want to talk about. You can put it in the comments. You can go to our website and you can let us know there. And you can sign up for our free newsletter to stay in the know. And I'm going to encourage you this week, if you don't follow us on Instagram, we just started an Instagram account as well as the Breakfast at Mom's podcast. You can find that link down below too. So, and I want to remind you above all is that you're awesome and you can do this and you are worthy. So until next week, we'll see you next time.